I feel like I've got a lot more awareness about stuff since we last spoke. I think I've maybe realised like how insecure I am still with myself and certain relationships.
Part of what is happening here is there is a sort of projecting of your inner critic onto others.
It's not the real thing. It's not what's actually happening. It's all what I'm doing.
You're recreating that reality moment to moment by the way that it's being projected. Welcome to this week's episode of In Therapy with me, Alex Howard. And this week we're going to be catching up with Hannah. We're talking about some quite sensitive material this week. We're talking about Hannah coming out to more of her family around her sexuality. And we've been doing quite a bit of work, Hannah and I, over the last few sessions around her inner critic and that voice of self-judgment. And part of really being free of those judgments is being fully ourselves in the world and having the courage and the pride to be seen as who we are in the world. And that can be a very challenging step sometimes. So that's what we're exploring this week. And here is Hannah. Hi, Hannah.
Hiya. You alright?
I'm good, thank you.
Feels like quite a lot has shifted since we last spoke. It's been quite a while.
Yeah, talk me through what's been happening.
Straight after I last spoke to you, I started doing the presence process, and I found that really helpful. That's kind of got me more in my body, I feel like. And I've been practicing stop process on like projections on the inner critic and defending the inner critic around people. And I've had like instances where I've not sweated, which has been quite nice.
Yeah, you mentioned in your email. So situations where previously you would have sweated, but then these times you didn't?
Yeah. There was a time with my friends, 2 times with my friends, like in person, and then 1 phone call with my uncle, where I didn't sweat at all.
Yeah. Do you have a sense of did something feel different, or you just noticed that it wasn't happening?
Yeah, I just noticed it wasn't happening. I was still a little bit wired with my friends, but generally a lot calmer. I think it was like what you were saying, like the inner critic was really strong with my friends when I wasn't realising it. And I think maybe that's practicing it has helped a bit.
Have you been seeing more of the inner critic as well? One of the things we talked about last time is just sort of getting better at sort of identifying and catching it. Do you feel like that's been happening more as well?
Yeah, definitely. It did feel quite overwhelming at one point because there's so much of it. And there is still a lot, like I'm still having a lot of sweating like in other instances. It's not like it's totally gone. It feels like there's progress in some spaces and then with some people, and then with others it's still very prominent.
Well, I guess the important thing is that the fact that you've noticed it being different with some people in some situations, A, it shows it can change, and B, it shows that this is a kind of good pathway to it changing in a sense. So, you know, I think before it might have felt impossible that it could change at all. So the fact that you've had some experiences, I think, is really great.
Yeah, it definitely felt like made me really happy.
Yeah, I'm sure it makes me happy to hear it. It's really great. And do you feel that you've been, beyond the fact there's been the difference in the sweating response, do you feel that you've been just sort of calmer, a bit calmer overall? Like how have you felt sort of more generally in your system?
Yeah, I just feel a lot calmer generally on my own at home. Like still like right now I'm finding it very like very activated, and definitely still like I did like a socially distanced like date, and that was really strong there. I could feel like that was quite overwhelming. I felt like the stop process and the defending the inner critic. Like I couldn't change how my body was. I couldn't get back in my body for quite a long time. But then on the other hand, I feel a lot better about myself in general. Like it feels like things have changed in general terms.
Can you say a bit more about that?
I feel like way less embarrassed and like ashamed of things, and like, I think it helped seeing the fear and anxiety episode. I forgot how challenging that session was, and seeing it kind of helped me get a bit of perspective. And I feel like I've just got more perspective generally about myself.
Yeah, I think a number of people in the comments of the two halves of that session were commenting on how brave you were and how kind of much people were impacted by your ability to sort of be with your feelings. And I sort of wondered how that was for you, just to sort of be in that vulnerable place, but actually to have such sort of positive feedback from that.
Yeah, it felt really good. And I think for the first time, it wasn't like just other people convincing me that. It was like I could see it myself. And I think another thing that's really kind of come up is like with like going on dates and things. Like previously, I feel really like I'd want to hide all the things that I can't do, and I feel embarrassed that I'd have to get taxis, and I'd feel like nervous to have to drop this into any of the conversation. And that would just cause me anxiety. But now I don't feel ashamed of that at all, which is like quite big.
Yeah. What you're describing and what it feels like just feels like there's more space, like more emotional and more energetic space for you.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like more like a whole person. Like I feel more like myself.
Yeah.
How I imagined it should be. Yeah.
Yeah. That's really great. How has your overall physical and cognitive energy been over the last sort of, I think it's probably about 5 weeks or so, roughly, I think, since we last spoke. And I know that the last time we spoke and the time before, it felt like you were starting to get back to more where you'd been at the start of the year in terms of capacity. Where do you feel you've been sort of in the last month or so?
I feel like I'm more stable again now. I feel like the headaches are always still very close to the edge, but I've been very strict, like been sticking to my routine quite well, and I've noticed how that's helped. And I feel like my physical energy is definitely more like it was kind of February, March. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
So you said in your email that one of the sort of things that sort of up for you at the moment is the fact that you haven't come out to your whole family about your sexuality. Do you want to say a bit about sort of where that's at? And yeah, it'd be good to hear about that.
Yeah, I guess it's just been on my mind for a bit about how, just with the whole, like how I feel in social situations and how my body responds. I guess I was thinking maybe that not having come out might be causing some responses, and I just was curious to know what you thought of that, I guess.
Well, I think there's two parts to this. I think I agree with you. I think it's something that needs to happen anyway. Of course, there's question around sort of timing, but I think whenever we feel that we're hiding the truth of who we are around people, that creates a barrier, and that can have an impact in terms of how we feel. But I suppose my question to you is, do you notice that your nervous system is more activated around certain people, perhaps where you're not able to fully be yourself in that way?
There have been times, definitely, where like all family occasions, I feel incredibly activated and wired and sweaty, and in a way that's almost kind of, I felt so overwhelmed that I felt unable to have that kind of personal conversation because of that, in a way. But part of me is wondering, if I just got it out of the way, then maybe I would be calmer.
What has historically, and I know that part of this has been, it's been a relatively new journey for you. So part of it is just I think you've been finding your own way with it. But I suppose the question is, when you imagine telling certain people, or in the past when you haven't told certain people, what's your fear of what might happen, or what's the inner critic sort of response that comes in?
I think a lot of it was tied up with my past relationship. and um, fearing judgment about that, and about, that I would have maybe not ever cared about that person, or just the whole thing tied up with that. I don't really feel like that anymore. Yeah, I don't feel like with being like rejection, like there's no worry about that with my family.
Okay.
With my dad's side, it's more like, I think it was just I knew that it would be talked about a lot, and
You don't want to be talked about. I get it. Yeah. It doesn't sound like necessarily it's a acute issue in certain situations. It sounds like it's more your overall sort of relationship to yourself and the world, and the fact that part of you is being held back in certain ways. And there's something I think about the path of self-love and the path of honoring the truth of who we are, that it's important to show ourselves to the world, if that makes sense. And I think that sometimes when we feel that we have to hide parts of us or hide things that are true for us, it takes a certain level of energy to sort of hold that in. But it also, in a sense, we're denying part of our life force. We're denying part of who we are. So I don't think it's something that you should feel under pressure to do. I don't think it's something that you should feel, if I don't do this, then I won't go the next step in my recovery process. I think it's more from a place of honoring yourself and self-love and self-care. That's sort of how I see it.
cool. Yeah, thank you.
Have you thought about the way that you would do it? Like would you tell people individually? Would you send an email or a letter to the how would you do it, do you think?
I was thinking, with my mum's side of the family, I'm pretty close to all of them, and I was just going to maybe a message, maybe.
And how about your dad's side of the family?
I wasn't sure. Like, I wasn't sure if I really wanted to. I guess the problem was, I felt reluctant to share anything personal with my dad. Really, bit of a barrier.
Because you were, before the whole lockdown situation, you were going to see your dad at a family gathering that you were questioning whether you were going to go to or not, and then it didn't happen, I think, because of the whole lockdown. So, have you had any contact with your dad in the last, or this year, I guess, almost?
No, no, I'm not had contact with him since he moved out, and that was what I felt I kind of needed. But I guess I also feel like concerned of how like this like lack of contact or lack of like resolve around it all, with how to deal with it in a way that doesn't impact my energy. Like, I just don't know.
How about his family? Do you have contact with them, or?
Yeah, a little bit. Just messages with some of them. Yeah, your phone call.
Ultimately, when it comes to, given the history of what's happened with your dad, I think everything should be on your terms. So I think whether or not you want to have contact or not shouldn't be dictated by his agenda or anyone else's agenda. It should be based upon what's right and what you want. I think the history gives you that entitlement. As
in, like, talk to his side of the family, how I be open with them about what I want to, regardless of my relationship with him and how I feel about all of that kind of thing. Keep it separate.
Well, I think it sort of depends upon how you feel towards them, in a sense, like how important it is for you that they're sort of in your life, in a sense. And I think that, and it may be a little bit sort of person by person, in a sense. I think what is true with something like this is people that you value the relationship and have a close relationship with, if they hear secondhand, that might be a little hurtful, possibly. For some people it just won't matter, and some people say, well, I wasn't close enough. But I think that's possibly a consideration. But again, you shouldn't feel pressured about what that means.
Yeah, I think because I'm not so close to them, it'll be maybe more of a person by person thing when it comes up with that side of the family. I don't feel like I want contact with my dad right now.
Yeah.
So it's not something that I'd, least of all, to kind of talk about something so personal.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think also, given the narrative of sort of what happened, I think having distance and having space is important, because I think in a sense for you to really process what's happened, you need to feel safe. You need to feel like you're not in the sort of energy of that relationship when you're trying to digest and process, which you have been. And I think you've been doing a great job of doing that. But part of your self-love and self-care is standing up for your truth and for what you need.
Okay. Yeah.
I wonder if kind of coming out to more people also in some ways might feel quite exciting, in a sense of sort of saying, yeah, this is me. This is part of my journey and what's been happening. And there's something about being seen in that, which I would imagine is important.
Yeah, I think definitely. And it's funny because it's something that I wanted to feel seen for a long time, like all kinds of areas of my life, but I was very ashamed of like all those things, and that it was like, stopping me. Like, so it was I was kind of holding myself back, really. So yeah, I think it would be good.
What would have been causing that holding back, I think, would have been your inner critic and your inner critic's ideas about what it thinks about your sexuality and who you are. And that would have been internalized judgments from, other people. And the more that you've got some distance and got some space from that, the more you can be in touch with your truth, which is actually, it's quite the opposite of something to be ashamed of. It's something to be proud of, because it's part of who you are.
Yeah. And it's like something I never wanted to struggle with. Like I felt for ages embarrassed that it was even something that I was struggling with. That wasn't what I wanted, and that was like the source of shame. Like it just got in a bit of a cycle.
You mean struggling with it and then being ashamed of the fact that you were struggling with it?
Yeah, like
right.
it was a lot to like admit, I think. Yeah, I definitely don't feel ashamed of it now. It was all. Good. It was never really about that I felt ashamed of who I'm attracted to. It was more like it was all tied up in my past relationship, I think, and guilt about that ending. And it was really heartbreaking thing to end it. And even though, at the time when it ended, I wasn't totally sure what I wanted, but I felt instinctively that, to work that out, I needed to be on my own. I needed to end it, and I also wanted to end it because of where my health is at.
Yeah.
But I didn't explain to him the part about me feeling unsure, right. Like, and that made me feel a lot of guilt. Like, I was because I hadn't been completely honest, and that was because I was worried. I didn't want him to think that it was, the whole relationship had been just, like, false, which I didn't feel.
And have you communicated with him since then?
No, not at all.
And you guys haven't been in touch since then?
No.
Does that feel like something that you need to communicate to him?
I guess it's something that I felt like I've not wanted to.
Can you say a bit more about, I'm not saying that you should, I'm just kind of exploring it. Can you say the place that feels like you don't want to, where does that come from?
I wouldn't want it to change how he viewed like our whole relationship. Because for me, it felt like, I was very happy in that relationship. And at one point, I just felt like I didn't feel that same kind of, instead of feeling excited about the prospects, say, of like moving in together, I felt anxiety about it. And I just knew it wasn't right and it wasn't going to be like enough. And it felt like quite a change, whereas I didn't want him to think that I'd been very dishonest or like I didn't ever care or things like that.
Although the relationship reached a point where it no longer felt right for several different reasons, it doesn't negate the fact that you loved him and that there were things about the relationship that were really good and really positive. And that's true of many relationships where there are relationships that are absolutely right for that chapter of our life, which may not be right for the next chapter of our life. And there are other relationships which were never right. And then there are relationships that maybe are meant to be lifetime long relationships. And just because a relationship ends up not being a lifetime long relationship doesn't make it bad or wrong. Like, I can think of the 2 long-term relationships that I had before I met my wife, and those relationships were wonderful, great relationships. Of course, they weren't perfect, but they were perfect for that time of my life, if that makes sense. And I loved those people then, and I still have love for them now. They just weren't the people that I was going to spend my life with, if that makes sense. And so I think it's important to remember that you can have loved someone and feel that someone was right for a certain point of your life, and that had a natural end point.
Yeah, I think so. And I just, it feels really emotional talking about it right now, even though it was 2 years ago now. I think because I felt so like guilty, in a way, it kind of like delayed me getting over, like moving on from it.
So I actually have a piece of homework for you to do around this.
Okay.
To really move on from a relationship, often there are unspoken either things that we actually needed to speak to that person, or things that we haven't fully metabolized in ourselves. And not fully processing that stuff can firstly cause us to be more defended in future relationships. And it can also just be a sort of emotional load in a sense. And a really helpful way of sort of processing that is to write a letter to that person. You may well not send the letter. That's not the purpose of writing it. But you sort of act as if you would send it, because it helps sort of focus. And what is it that for you felt unsaid at the time, or feels unsaid at this point? So almost like the things that you would want him to know and the things that you'd want him to understand, that you take the time to actually process that, think about that. There's something about writing a letter, which is quite a, you have to go through a process, let's say, to organize your thinking. And you might go through 3 or 4 drafts of the letter. But it's a very, very helpful way of just sort of processing and thinking about what was or what is unspoken and unsaid.
Okay.
How does that feel?
Yeah, it feels nerve-wracking, but yeah, I'm happy to do that, definitely.
You can do it. There's no rush. You can be gentle with yourself in the process. But what it feels like to me is you're still in process about this historical relationship. And I understand that you're thinking it's 2 years ago, but I can think of the gap between when I left a relationship and when I went through this process was 5 years. And I met my wife about a month later. And there was something just very interesting about, I couldn't have a functional relationship until I'd processed and sort of, and it's not neatly packing it away and put in a box, but it's like, there's just stuff in one's energy system that's sort of still there and incomplete when you've been in a love affair with someone, that needs to be metabolized and needs to be processed to be able to be in a place that we're truly clear and ready to move into what's next.
That makes total sense. Yeah, I'm glad I brought that up.
And I think you might find as well that it helps with some of your reflection about how you're feeling about family members and other people, like, because I think one of the themes of the letter sounds like it is going to be your sexuality, and you're not writing the letter for him, you're writing the letter for you, if you understand the difference. So you're not sort of constantly changing your words to make it more delicate for him to hear. You're really like, what is it that in my heart needs to be spoken and said.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. How are you doing with sort of activity levels and pacing and sort of routine structure? How's all of those pieces at the moment?
The routine and structure is going really well. I've not had trouble like sticking to my routine now, especially now my headaches are a lot less. Activity, I've kept it the same, but I feel like I couldn't do any more cognitive stuff, but I feel like I could do more physical, like maybe increase my walk a little bit, but I have not done that yet.
Yeah. So obviously go gently in that process. But I definitely think as the capacity's there, gradually sort of bouncing the boundaries and expanding what you're doing, I think is great.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and since like lockdown's easing a bit, I've been seeing friends or seeing someone like once a week,
Great.
So for the last 3 weeks, I've done something in person with someone, and I feel like that's helping me understand where I am in relation to where I was before lockdown now. So it seems to be going well so far. So
Yeah, that's really good.
yeah,
That's really good. Do you have any other questions for today?
yeah. I saw my friends last night, and it was really good. I didn't feel the inner critic too much, and then when I got home, I did stop process from what was there, and I went to bed feeling quite just fine. But then I woke up in the night just because I did anyway. But as soon as I woke up, I just felt like dread and just embarrassment and shame straight away, and I straight away thought about last night, and I just wanted that confused me.
So what can happen? What you're describing is not an uncommon experience. What can happen sometimes is we get a sort of breakthrough, and we sort of feel we take more space, and there's a sort of celebration, a sense of wow, that was good. And then as we relax and we're vulnerable, the inner critic sort of comes back doubly hard and goes, "Who do you think you are? You know, that's not true of you." And so it's almost like it sort of tells us off for the fact that we sort of took up more space. So it's sort of waiting for you to be a bit more vulnerable again, and then so just seeing that and going, if that happens again, going, hang on, I see you, I see what you're doing. And just be, you might find that you need to particularly work to defend yourself after you've taken that step. So it's not an uncommon thing. The thing to remember is that you are taking back the power from your inner critic, and you can see that in your body, and you can see that in the fact that you had experiences like you had last night. And it's not a straight line. That often as we take back that space, it then sort of tries to mount a bit of a defense sometimes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Thank you.
Good. All right. I will email you. And in the meantime, just keep doing what you're doing. I'm really pleased to hear the progress. It's really great.
Okay, cool. Thank you for your help.
You're welcome, Hannah. Bye.
A couple of days later, and I'm feeling a lot better. I felt really uncomfortable in that session and afterwards as well. It was just quite hard talking about that stuff, but I feel really glad that we did, because I just needed to. And I feel very grateful for Alex's advice on it as well. All of his advice has been really great. So I feel positive that doing this homework is going to help as well. I just feel quite positive in general at the moment. I've noticed as well, just the last couple months, I'm not so worrying so much about recovery. I'm not thinking to the future all the time. I'm kind of just doing it bit by bit, and that feels just a lot better. I'm just focusing on what's happening now, and that just feels so much nicer. It just seems to have happened naturally as part of doing this project. Some more emotions have come up since the session, but I feel better equipped to know what to do with them now, and what tools to use and stuff. Yeah, so it feels all good, good news.
So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode of In Therapy. As always, I'd love to hear your reflections, your questions, your comments. Please do share in the comment section below the video. Please do also like the episode. If you haven't already subscribed to me here on YouTube, please do so. It means you'll see new episodes as they released. It also tells YouTube this is content worth sharing. Also, if you click the notification bell, you'll get notifications as new episodes are released. So next week, we're going to be catching up with Sally. And I know many of you have been wondering how Sally has been doing. Sally's last episode, she was sharing about the passing of her mum and the impact that it had. We're going to hear how she's been doing since then next week here on In Therapy. Thanks for watching. So last time we spoke was soon after your mum had passed.
Yeah.
So I was just wondering how you've been doing.
All my symptoms came back as bad as they'd ever been before. I was actually really shocked. I was thinking, I'm going to be off for ages. This is really bad. But I just used all the tools that you guys have taught me, and sorted myself out.
It's surprising how many people know what to do and don't do what they know to do, in a sense. And you've really worked hard.
Thank you. Yeah, it works.